Hey everyone, Nick here and welcome back to GamerTube, and welcome back to our Little Nightmares character concept series. So in today's video, we'll be looking into the Lumberjack. So we'll be looking into this character's location, their gameplay mechanics, and all that good stuff as well. Like always, I will just state that these are just a couple of our own ideas. We don't really expect Bandai Namco or Tarsier Studios to really take these ideas and make a game or a DLC. These are just creepy stories we get to tell, and we hope you enjoy. And lastly, before we start today's video, do be sure to subscribe to GamerTube because it does help out our channel out greatly, and it also keeps you up to date with all the future videos that we post. Alrighty, well, let's take a look at the Lumberjack. So in the last few videos, we were introduced to our nameless protagonist and their friend. Their friend unfortunately fell ill with a deadly plague that infected the nearby village. After our main character met the plague doctor, they managed to successfully get the cure for their dear friend. After they cured them, they were still far too weak to move. Our protagonist decided to go off back into the village and find them both some food. It's been some time since they've returned. Their friend, who's feeling slightly better, decides to go look for them in case they were in danger. So we are now introduced to our second protagonist, the Pale Kid. The Pale Kid has lived most of their lives on the outskirts of the village. Alongside with their tin-headed friend, they never really quite had a home. They mainly lived wherever it was safe to inside the woods. On occasion, they both would scurry into the village like rats to search for food and supplies. The last time they went to the village, the Pale Kid wasn't so lucky. They fell greatly ill with the plague and almost near death. Fortunately for them, they were cured by their friend. But their friend still hasn't returned, so it was up to them to find out where they were. As they walk through the woodland pathway towards the village, they can hear a strange sound, almost like a dull thudding sound that repeated itself again and again. The Pale Kid decided to take no notice of it and continue on. For all they knew, it could have just been a strange animal. As the path towards the village narrowed, they suddenly heard a loud cracking sound. All of a sudden, a large tree falls to the ground, shaking the earth as it blocks their pathway. Startled by the loud thundering sound, the Pale Kid runs and hides behind a tree stump. They see a shadowy figure emerge from the brush. They approach the fallen tree and look over behind them, almost catching a glimpse of the hiding child. As the Pale Kid looks out from behind the stump, they get a better look of the shadowy figure. This character is revealed to be the Lumberjack. A disturbing looking old man with a scruffy dirt-filled beard and a large unnerving mouth filled with rotten teeth. Their skin is pale and off-coloured. Their face is also sunken in and lifeless. Overall, their eyes, or lack thereof, were the most haunting. Just two dark empty holes that stare right through the player. In the Lumberjack's hand is a worn and weathered axe. And on their back rests a large rusted saw. The Lumberjack used to be one of the sole providers of wood for the village. The majority of houses and buildings were built with the very same trees that they cut down in the forest. But ever since the plague and the mysterious dark liquid appeared at the village, things haven't been the same since. Ever since the residents of the village have gone through a sinister change, the Lumberjack has become a reclusive hermit who lives out in the woods. Even though there's no need for their services, they still do the one thing they know. The Lumberjack pulls out their large rusty saw and starts to cut away at the large fallen tree. The Pale Kid watches as this disturbing individual saws away. The Lumberjack stops to catch their breath. As they do, the Pale Kid accidentally steps on a small branch. The Lumberjack turns their head towards the loud snap. They immediately throw their axe right in the child's direction. The axe lands in the stump with a loud thud. The pale child quickly runs back into the woods to get away. The Lumberjack walks up to the stump and retrieves their axe. They set off to track down the little creature that's been watching them. No one was allowed uninvited in their woods, and this little rat was no exception. The Pale Kid runs through the forest until they find a dense cluster of trees to hide behind. They can see the lumberjack slowly approaching them in the distance. The Pale Kid didn't know if the lumberjack could see or not. Their senses seemed pretty keen, but with 2 black holes in their face and no eyes, it didn't seem likely they could see. They looked around and then placed their hand on one of the trees. All of a sudden, 2 small white dots appeared in their eye sockets. The child hears a strange noise. As they look up, they see the very same eye looking down on them from a hole in the tree. Then out of nowhere, the axe flies towards the child, almost hitting them, and embeds itself in the tree. Any closer and it would have hit them. As the pale child looked around, they could see more of the sinister looking eyes peering at them from the trees. It now became clear. The lumberjack is using the trees to see them. In this gameplay segment, the player needs to try and evade the eyes that are looking for them through the trees. Whenever they find a new hiding place, they need to quickly run elsewhere before the new eyes appeared. When one of the eyes spots the player, the lumberjack would throw their axe, striking the player with its sharp blade. Or alternatively, the lumberjack could also run up and grab them. After dodging all the eyes and successfully evading the crazed lumberjack, the Pale Kid ventures further into the dark woods. As they go deeper into the woods, the trees begin to look different. These sinister looking trees are all decorated with axes and saw blades wedged into them. In some of the trees is something quite strange looking. The lumberjack has stabbed multiple metal spouts into the strange looking trees. Out of the spouts drips a strange looking dark liquid. The fluid trickled out and into wooden pails. They had no idea what this stuff was. Whatever it was, it gave off a horrible feeling of dread and despair. It almost draws you in, but you wouldn't dare touch it. A few more trees down the path and the Pale Kid came across the lumberjack's log cabin. It was a lonely and deserted looking place. They knew the lumberjack was still behind them. But the Pale Kid was still exhausted from starvation and needed something to eat. If they were ever going to find their tin-headed friend, they needed to get their strength up. In this gameplay segment, once the player has snuck into the cabin, they need to search the area for something to eat. They need to find and eat a minimum of 5 small food items to regain their strength. Whilst the Pale Kid is in this starving form, they move much slower and don't jump as high. The more food they consumed, the more their movements would improve. After the child searched the whole house and found whatever looked safe enough to eat, they then needed to find a way to escape this forest. As they go to exit the house, the door swings open and in walks the lumberjack. They close the door and place their axe on the table. Since there aren't any trees around, the player should be safe since the lumberjack is essentially blind. In this gameplay segment, the player would have to be extremely quiet while sneaking to the door. One creak or squeak from the wooden floorboards and it would all be over. The player would have to move very slow and avoid any of the loose floorboards. Once they reach the door, they quickly open it as the hinges squeak. They quickly run through as the lumberjack chases after them. As they both run through the forest, the player would have to make their way through multiple obstacles. They run through a large hollow log in hopes that the lumberjack couldn't reach them. As they enter, their axe drives through the hollow log, almost hitting the Pale Kid. They have to guess where the axe will strike next and do their best to dodge the oncoming attacks. The axe drives through the wood especially hard this time and gets stuck. Whilst the lumberjack tries to pull it out, the player seizes the opportunity to run off and hide. They eventually make it back to the strange trees with the dark fluid draining from them. The lumberjack will use the trees once again to see where they are. The Pale Kid then comes up with a plan that would work to their advantage. In this final gameplay segment, the player needs to focus on the holes in the trees. Whenever they see the eyes appear, they would then need to pour the dark fluid down the hole. When they do, the lumberjack shouts in pain as the fluid exits from their eye sockets. It worked! Their eye sockets and the trees are connected. If they pour the fluid down enough of the holes in the trees, they might be able to stop the lumberjack. As the child continues to hide and evade the lumberjack and pour more of the fluid into the trees, eventually this begins to be too much for the crazed hermit. All of the dark slime pours out of their face and slowly envelops their body. The lumberjack can't move a muscle as they are covered in the thick dark substance. Eventually they're fully covered and frozen in place. The Pale Kid did it. They can finally head back and find their friend. Whilst walking back, they come across a miniature hatchet. They pick it up and take it with them. When they reach the large fallen tree, they start to chop away at it little by little, slowly making their way through. If they can't go over it, then they'll have to go through it. As they chop away, they can't help but think about their friend and what kind of danger they were in. They needed to hurry. They needed to find Hollow. Alright everyone, well that's all we have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider leaving a like, commenting, and subscribing, as it helps out a lot and it's greatly appreciated. Also, do be sure to comment down below what you thought of the lumberjack, and also what other characters you'd like to see going forward. Alrighty, well, to the next video, I'll catch you later. Bye.